Hello there, gentle listener, or viewer even. Right, first fuck up of the show. We're off to a good start.
Yes.
This is a new show, totally different from the other ones. It isn't just two Odgies hands talking about things they don't know anything about. This would be a learned and well-researched video, like fuck it will be. So it's me, Clive Davis, and my good friend over there,
Nicholas O'Shea-Con.
and welcome to Canonical as Feck. Not to be confused with our other new series, Canon and Canonical as Feck, where we take a deep dive into unfunny British comedy duos of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea.
That is a great idea, yes.
Cannonball, Little and Large. I'm sure even more obscure ones we could get to. Anyway, we're not doing that.
Okay. No, not today.
Right.
No.
So just to explain what we are doing here. So this is right. So the idea here was, I think both Nick and myself are very keen to educate ourselves in, I don't know what you'd call it, the
literature of the world.
Yeah, but not just literature. I feel as if, base culture, the canon, the sciences, the philosophy,
all of it,
the natural sciences. Yeah,
we figured, at my age of what, 47, and your age of whatever it is, Clive, that this was a great time to begin the process of trying to understand all the great ideas that humankind has kind of developed and come up with over the last, say, 5,000 years.
Yeah, we should be able to breeze through that.
No. Yeah.
So anyway, obviously hubris very much to the fore here. We figured, well, it might be because I quite like watching other people kind of come to certain realizations or learn. You learn along, watch with mother kind of thing, right? So I thought it might be a good idea. I mean, obviously, if you really want to know about stuff, you go to experts and things like that. But then there's a certain, there's a certain thrill, I think, in following along with other stupid people like us. Because then, or if they can figure it out, then I can probably figure it out, right? So the idea here,
assuming that we can figure it out.
Yeah, which is not. That's
no guarantees. Gentle viewers.
No, money back guarantee if you're unsatisfied. So the idea was through, I guess it's going to probably go on for a while, a series of podcasts every now and again, because there's a certain amount of research going to be involved in it, where we're going to have to go away and read a few books at least, right? To kind of make our way through the canon. At first, the idea was to more or less chronologically, which I think we're still kind of going to go a little bit, but it became apparent early on that it's inevitable we're going to be jumping back and forth a bit. So initially, before we started, we talked about doing this a little while ago, didn't we, Nick? And at first I said, all right, Nick, I got this. Let me sit down and make
map.
Yes, I'll make a timeline of just all the major points, and then we can put it into some kind of order. And then I discovered that just creating a timeline of bullet points would probably take a few decades because you keep finding things. So then we kind of abandoned that idea and thought, well, fuck it, let's just jump in, right? At a certain point, and then we can kind of go backwards and forwards, because otherwise we would have had to start with
the cave paintings at Lascaux, I think.
Well, no, I think we'd have had to go even further back
to the Big Bang.
Yeah, and now there's the James Webb telescope and pictures of ancient galaxies, and so I think if we insisted on doing it chronologically, we'd never get it off the ground, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea is to educate ourselves more than anyone else, but maybe we might accidentally help a few more people I mean, that's unlikely, but you know.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the basic kind of idea. So we'll see how we get along with. And so yeah, so we decided as our jumping in point, we were thinking, well, we go pretty far back. Let's start with something, yeah, like you said, rather than kind of read a whole bunch of books about cave paintings and like try and stretch. Let's start with something relatively substantial, but also you know, far enough back that it could be considered a good solid base, and that is Gilgamesh.
Yeah, which I mean is widely, if you do any kind of Google search of where does literature begin, where does human literature begin? I mean, Gilgamesh is pretty often
not that cow literature. That's even further back.
No. Or that the insect stuff is very hard to parse.
Who knows? I mean, you know, within the oral tradition, maybe, or you know, those insecty, maybe they are telling stories about.
Oh yeah. Mean.
They're out now, by the way. Here, I don't know if you can get the background. Yeah,
excellent.
Maybe that's what they're doing. They're reciting legends.
Passages. Yeah. That's why it's repetitive. You'll find that. You'll find it in Gilgamesh as well. There's certain parts that are, you know, repeated as refrains. But actually, I loved that in one of the books we read. Remind me again, the book we read that was not so much a retelling or a translation of Gilgamesh, but about the creation of Gilgamesh.
This is Gilgamesh, The Life of a Poem by Michael Schmidt, is one of the 3 or 4 books we. I'm assuming the reason you keep forgetting is it on your Kindle?
They're on my Kindle, yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, so this is this one. So this is this one.
Perfect. Yeah.
Gilgamesh,
and now, as I say this, I'm thinking I'm wrong. It's actually the Andrew George translation, because the Andrew George translation.
That's this one.
Yes, Penguin has quite a lot of other material besides just a translation of the poem and a translation of older versions of
right.
But it does talk quite a bit in some of its notes about the discovery of the text, you know, I mean, because that's part and parcel of the story of Gilgamesh, is the way in which it exists and was found.
Because the other one will be, this is the N.K. Sanders,
the prose version of the poem. But I think so. To bringing it full circle back to cicadas again, I think it's Andrew George who mentions that like they would find these clay tablets that like a cicada had crawled across, and they're like, oh shit, we've lost 4 words on that one, because you know, and that's I mean, maybe we can talk about whether or not we want to talk about how it was discovered first, or do we want to just jump into the text and then get to the whole mysterious, redacted, fragmented nature of it?
I think it is worth talking. The one thing about this is worth talking about, the kind of weird dichotomy here is the fact that even though we're going back, and this certainly would be considered the oldest kind of to a certain extent, surviving kind of long narrative poem, right? Like you said, it's kind of where we begin with world literature, really, right? I mean, that's why we chose it for this first episode. However, oddly enough, it was only discovered in the mid-19th century by people in pith helmets, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So weirdly enough, it's like the oldest one, but also at the same time, the scholarship about it is the youngest, right? So it's had to do a lot of kind of catching up, right? Because all these other epics have had, you know, people have had centuries to mull over them, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like
to parse them and to,
Just to put this into context, people have had maybe 3 times as long to digest like the works of Shakespeare than they have about something, you know, it's potentially 5,000 years old. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, I suppose it's worth mentioning too that the version that we're going to be talking about, for the most part, is the Assyrian version, but it does have, there are older, you know, can you say the name of the person who is most widely considered to have put the definitive version together?
I probably can't say it properly, but I'd have a bash at it.
Okay.
Si in lek lequi unini.
Okay,
maybe
I'll go with that. Sure, but that they,
Bob,
I don't know,
to his friends.
That Bob, in a way, put this together out of in that way that Shakespeare, kind of used pre-existing narratives, or and kind of wove something new out of, those chunks and pieces from the past. I mean, it does seem as though this Assyrian version, which is the most highly considered and the most complete in a way, is still made up of chunks of much older material.
Right. So so let's kind of put this into a sort of, let's see if we can lay down the basics then. So first of all, we're talking ancient Mesopotamia, right? We're talking between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, kind of modern day Iraq
and Kuwait.
Yeah, that area.
Although they do go to Syria at one point.
We'll talk about, yes, and we'll also talk about how the tablets as well seem to have been, and all the different versions. But as far as we can tell, if we're talking, well, first of all, if we're talking like historical Gilgamesh, as in there was a real person,
maybe
who was
like King Arthur.
Maybe
there was a real Gilgamesh. Yep.
Who was the king of the city-state of Uruk, right?
The sheepfold. Yep.
Then we're talking somewhere around 2,900 BC or BCE, they say nowadays, I guess.
Yeah.
And then maybe haven't been kind of written down to a certain extent somewhere or other later on in that millennium, right? So a good few hundred years later. And then to your point, there's apparently there might have been a scribe called Sin Lequi Unini or something like that, who maybe kind of wrote down another version for all time, right?
Yes,
is what we might refer to as the epic of Gilgamesh. But that would have been like another 500 years later, again, somewhere between 1600 and maybe 1155, something like that, right?
And that seems to be the version that basically the world is most familiar with. Like that's the version that N.K. Sanders, that's the version that Andrew George is working with. I mean, for the most part, although he does in his and Andrew George's, he does actually translate and give us some of those earlier versions of the poem and variations of it.
Right.
But what's interesting is it seems as though the oldest version, according to consensus, is actually what's appended as the end. And in some versions, I noticed, for example, in Andrew George's, he has left out this final tablet, whatever it is, 12 or tablet 12, maybe, right? He's just said, no, it's not actually a part of this Syrian version, right? But it may be the oldest surviving Gilgamesh story. Right,
yes. And also, so also we should mention that there's the split as well. There's the Sumerian language versions and then the Akkadian language versions. And yes, and like you said, there might have been legends of Gilgamesh told earlier, and I don't know, Michael Schmidt seems a bit, he's not convinced that they belong to an oral tradition.
That it was an oral tradition, that may have always been a written tradition,
he doesn't come flat out and say that's nonsense, but I get the feeling reading between the lines that he thinks that's unlikely for, I don't know what, for whatever reason I'm not quite sure why he's reached that conclusion. It seems to me, doesn't seem a preposterous idea that there would have been oral storytelling.
Maybe he's just annoyed that it's taken for granted when there isn't actually any evidence to say.
I suppose so.
For sure that's the case.
But we're dealing in such fragmented territory, right? That I think if you're going to be too stringent about only what we have the facts about, then we're not really going to move forward, right? So you have, and like you said, yes, there's some that were found in Syria, tablets, and so after they happened across this discovery in the mid 19th century. Then they went look, because that was by accident, right?
Right.
And then they went looking for tablets. And the thing that's fascinating as well is so these would have been written, we should mention as well, in cuneiform clay tablets, right?
Right. And cuneiform is basically a form of writing, right, where you carve into a clay tablet, and it seems like it almost like it's described in a way as having started out as a form of like hieroglyphics or kanji almost, where one symbol represented a whole word or a whole word, and then slowly transmogrified into a more syllabic,
right.
you know, yeah.
There's another actually interesting thing that Mike, considering that he's, on the one hand, he says we shouldn't take this, on the other hand, he does go off on some, like, because they're his ideas maybe, or you know, he's a bit more, but it's quite fascinating that he does talk a little bit about also the possibility. He says he's, to be fair, he does say, I'm not entirely convinced about, no one's ever kind of really made a case for this, but it's interesting that he even considers the possibility that it could also even work as a form of braille, and like if you felt it, like depending on how deep the inscription was or something like that, then that could,
there might be nuance of meaning in there.
Which again, there's even if that's bullshit, it's such a fascinating concept, I think.
I mean, Andrew George talks about it a lot too, in terms of like that photographs aren't good enough documentation of the tablets to be able to truly read from. That in fact a better documentation were the drawings made of the tablets, because they could show what was on the corner of the tablet, or that they better reproduce it because of there's an issue of shadow. You need to have a certain amount of shadow to be able to read it.
Red in the sun, right, as well, like at a certain time of day or something like that. And then of course you could spend decades reading into a particular thing, and then actually it was some guy who was bent over it, like dropped his pipe in the wet tablet or something.
Because another thing that is really interesting to me is that one of the reasons we have so many, I mean, it is fragmented, you know, like there isn't a complete version of
literally fragmented, so we should mention. Like, there's actually like bits like that they've had
it has to be almost
together,
sellotaped back together, this thing, and there are various passages missing, there are words missing. It's true in some ways it's a really postmodern, like it's an assemblage, right? It's like a William S. Burroughs cut up from 5,000 years ago, right, where we're trying to make sense of this, and this acknowledgement that it's an ongoing process, and that, you know, Andrew George, I think, acknowledges that he will die before it's, I mean, he's spent his life working on this, attempting to bring the most, you know, complete and accurate translation, but that it's not something that we're going to see.
It's folly, really. It's madness, because the other thing as well is when they went looking for this stuff, what's interesting is they would find things scattered between. So they'd find these stores of old, you know, cuneiform clay tablets, and of course, you know, even if we lived in an ideal world and there was one like benevolent institution that was allowed access to everything, and but it's not like that, because of, you know,
politics,
wars around the world, politics and thieves and black, all this stuff is in different fucking institutions around the world, different, you know, the chance of actually putting it all in one place and having a look at it together. Now then, I mean, that just that alone, and that would just be the first step, seems like a near impossibility.
Consider that Iraq is one of the places where a lot of this stuff exists, and you consider what's happened to Iraq in the last 100 years, right? And you would imagine that the people involved in you know, Assyriology or whatever, you know, must be tearing their hair out each and every time.
It's worth mentioning that Assyriology seems to be almost a discipline that was created out of discovering Gilgamesh. It didn't exist previous to that. There was no such thing as Assyriology, I guess, apart from maybe people in Assyria who
and the process of even figuring out what, I mean, because there was, you know, there wasn't a Rosetta Stone for this either, I don't think. It was in part that they discovered that there were these Sumerian versions, there were these Babylonian versions, there was all of these different, and they were kind of comparing them and trying to figure out, well, if that word is the same as this word,
there's no like linear B tablet or something like that, or and what the other thing as well is it's scattered, like it wasn't as if when you discovered it would have been in the Gilgamesh section of the Nineveh library that survives, right?
Right.
It would have been like between, like, you know, cuneiform tablets in which people had copied down like shopping lists.
Oh yeah, bills of lading for ships and so on, because that was what most of the literature was, or most of what was left behind is
just records,
receipts.
right? Just records.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I was trying to think of a good analogy, right? And this isn't a good enough analogy, because this is the nearest I could get, just to kind of pinpoint like just how, I mean, obviously I'm glad that the process is ongoing, but the chance that the likelihood that we'll ever actually get, you know, a definitive, imagine in like 1,000 years time, right? Someone after some kind of, you know, apocalyptic war where things have been scattered to the different ends of the earth, right? Someone had heard about this character called Tarzan, right? And they tried to put together the definitive film version of Tarzan, which they've heard about, but they've only got bits from like this Johnny Weissmuller version, this one over here with Miles O'Keefe, but rather than being made decades apart, they've been made hundreds of years apart. So they're actually trying to piece together one film,
the story
from
is,
dozens of films, and some of the he goes off to,
and they're like
Nazis
what's Christopher Lambert doing in this version?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I was trying to think, it's kind of a bit like that, isn't it? It's like
absolutely.
Assuming that there isn't your text at all, and that it would that you're going to get anywhere near it, because so many people would have written about this Gilgamesh dude.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's interesting though is then when you do go back and read some of the oldest versions, where there are pieces that come almost verbatim and are just transposed into this as, you know, Assyrian version, which is kind of the. So I mean, that surprised me. I was like, okay, well, so when I can't remember his name, but Bob. When Bob would discover a piece he really liked, he would just be like, that's great the way it is. I'm not going to reword this or expand on this. I'm just going to use this chunk as found, right?
Although he wasn't as excited as I should have written down his name.
Oh, the guy who took all of his clothes off.
There was a guy, apparently when he first discovered the tablets, he got so excited he just ran around the room removing his clothes.
Yes, I should know his name too, because he is the first translator, and the tablet that he was translating was the tablet on the deluge. And you know what I'll tell you? I learned this, which is really embarrassing to learn at 47. I finally understand what the word antediluvian means.
Okay.
Which I have been reading since I was a kid in various H.P. Lovecraft type of stories, and had always just thought was a synonym for really old, which it technically is. But I did not know that antediluvian specifically meant before the deluge.
Yeah. It's like antebellum, right? Antebellum South. It's the same.
Right. But yeah, I was just, it was the diluvian
it's funny. It's amazing what you learn, right? Sometimes you should not feel embarrassed, Nick.
Okay. Well, no, I was excited. I was like,
this happens to us all.
More nuance to this understanding of what.
Have you been going around slipping antediluvian into all your conversations?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, you would be surprised at the number of chances you have to talk about things that happened before the Great Flood.
Right. Because a lot happened before then. So we'll get into that as well, because that's the other kind of fascinating thing as well.
I think there was one other thing I wanted to mention, which is so I mean, one of the reasons why it exists in so many places is that it was kind of rote work for trainee scribes, right? So when you were learning to write cuneiform, the most often it seems like one of the things that you were asked to copy out the most often was Gilgamesh, right? So hence you've got all of these versions. But I love the idea of all of these people just kind of sitting down and it'd be like, again, I don't know, like make work, the stuff I give my kids, you know, like the times tables, like somehow being of great use to somebody thousands of years in the future, like, oh, that's what 7 times 4 is. Right. Perfect.
So I just to reiterate, so basically we're talking about a series of tales that were poems, I suppose you could say that much without causing controversy, that were written over. They even found some tablets in like Anatolia and like Turkey, right? Written across a wide expanse of space and time, several times in different languages, and which also went on to be copied by, well, for instance, it seems the Hebrew Bible's Noah story is pretty much the lead story. Right? So you've got all these things that even initially, even if they survived, it would have been a heroic task to bring them all together. But then they've all gone buried underground, smashed to bits as well.
Yes.
And there's people arguing to this day about what they mean. And then even beyond that, even if you know what it means, how do you write this with a modern audience in mind? How much do you try and obfuscate it so that you're understanding its alien nature to our modern world, or how much do you want us to relate to it? Or there's so many ways you can approach this, right? So it is a fascinating. It is an absolutely fascinating thing to start studying, I think, Gilgamesh. I started looking into it a few years ago and put it on the shelf a little bit, and coming back to it now, I was re-energized at just, this is you can see why people go into this, down this rabbit hole, right? Because it leads off in so many other directions as well, but it is such a fascinating, shadowy kind of land of the dead, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's hard to even get your head around trying to imagine the play. Like we've lost so much of the context. I mean, one of the things when we read stories, written even 100 years ago, we kind of have a sense maybe of what things look, what houses look like, what clothes look like, what, like the other cultural kind of milieu that they're set in. But I find with this, it was, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoyed reading. I read a graphic novel version of it at the end of having read the various versions we decided to read. And I enjoyed that just for having something else to hang my understanding of the story on.
Right.
Was just somebody's attempt to translate it into visuals.
Right. So I think the way we might want to go about this is I mean, I don't think we're going to go through the whole thing in terms of what happens, but we can talk generally about some. And I think if you're in agreement, Nick, I would like to do this via the Nancy K. Saunders translation. Okay. So N.K. Saunders wrote this, I think it's first published 1960, apparently. So this is a prose version. This is not a poem. She's basically retold the story of Gilgamesh in a very easy to read version. We'll get into Michael Schmidt a bit later, but one of his problems with it, even though he admires it greatly, and a lot of people got into Gilgamesh via
it seems to be the entry point for most. A certain few people who read it first, as opposed to watch the Star Trek episode about it.
Right.
This is
the gateway drug, and this is the second version I actually read. But I'm glad I read this version because it really puts the story into your head, like as much as it can. You get the kind of shape of it. But Michael Schmidt but he likes us to be aware that she has imposed this kind of post-Homeric epic quality onto it, right? Which is not necessarily there, although from my own personal bias, I totally see why she did that. I don't have a problem with that. It makes sense. It reads like an epic to me. You know what I mean?
And I suppose maybe it's a bit more fixed, and maybe that's what some of the people would rather be more unfixed. But she kind of it's kind of quite concrete. But it's great. It's great. I mean, I'm glad I started with it too. I think it would have been more alienating and more difficult to have gotten a sense of the story if I'd gone right into
exactly.
translation.
You need to learn the notes first before you can go off and fuck about with free jazz, right? You need to know what you're straying from.
Yeah, who are these characters? What is this story? Although I will say she does include the controversial final tablet as part of this. Basically, the trip to the netherworld and the death of Gilgamesh are included, which are not widely considered to really be truly a part of this version of the story.
Right. Well, I mean, where to start? So it seems as if
so it starts with Gilgamesh being a douchebag.
Yeah, Gilgamesh.
One of the things I like most about this is his heel face turn, right? Like we begin at the start of the story with him just being kind of like he's the king. He seems like a young king. He seems like he's a frat boy who just wants to wrestle and beat people up and screw everyone's
deflower other people's wives. He's like
wives. Yes.
Dowell in Caligula, right? That way. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where we begin with kind of, and we're like the epic of this guy. This guy seems like an asshole. Yeah. And then we have the people crying out to the gods, like, what, we know he's our king, and that's fine, but like, could you do something about him? Could you could you help us out here? And then the gods decide that they will.
Yeah, they decide that he needs a match, right?
Yeah.
So they from clay, they create
a great image. Yeah.
Who's a beast-like man, it seems like, covered in matted fur.
Yep. And they just drop him naked and fully formed into the wilderness.
Yeah. And he seems to be a friend to the animals as well, right? Like he goes around rescuing them from traps and things like that. And there's something here. So what happens eventually is that Gilgamesh has a harlot seduce him, right? And they
I mean, initially it's the trapper, right? This is all fascinating. Like initially the trapper finds him, like this guy keeps this naked man keeps lapping water out of the water hole and like undoing my traps. And he goes to his dad, what am I going to do about this? And his dad is like, well, you need to get a hooker from the city and bring her out here, and also talk to Gilgamesh about this, because he's going to want to hear about this. And so yes, he goes, but it does seem as though the temple harlot is a much more highly considered role in this society than I think it's dangerous to kind of like to make modern assumptions around prostitution, and like her role seems I think
she's not devalued, right? She's not like
not at all
trash or something. She has a job to do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And my understanding from what little reading I did about this beyond that is that at the time, basically having sex with the temple harlot was a way of getting closer to the god of the temple that she worked at, right? So that it was basically this was a form of communion,
right?
Like it's a spiritual act as much as it is a physical act. Right. But it is great that this guy brings her back, and he's like, "Can you squat down near the watering hole and kind of like
flash
legs a little
bit,
and see what happens?" And Enkidu is like
the original honey trap, right?
Yeah. Hello. And then they screw for 7 solid days.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, what's interesting about this to me as well is the whole thing about him being one of the animals, and then after he has sex, like the animals abandon him even, and him eating animals after that, which is something he did before. This is a very kind of is interesting, considering when we get to the deluge and people talking about whether the Hebrew Bible had been inspired by. There's something. This is a very twisted.
The fall from Eden. There's an element.
Garden of Eden story of sorts, isn't it?
But way less judgmental.
Right.
I feel like in a way it's much more ambivalent, right? Like there is this element of loss, right? I mean, he becomes by becoming self-aware, by becoming aware that he can even has thoughts, by becoming aware of tiredness. Like after the 7 days, he's like, oh man, my legs are really weak. Like I feel like kind of tired, which he's never experienced before, and it's from this epic shag session.
Walking down that long hill to Shibuya station from the love hotels at the top is
yeah. So there's this element of loss. Like he goes, his animal chums are like, yeah, no thanks, you don't seem properly animal anymore. You seem there's something's changed about you, bro. And they take off. But then there's something to be gained from the loss of that world.
Right.
Whereas that's not the feeling I get when it's been a while since I've read the Old Testament, but that's not the feeling I get of them getting slung out of.
When one door opens and another closes, right? But then again, I think off air we've because when we were discussing this project, you seem to be reluctant to go anywhere near the Bible. You're not keen about it. But I think the problem with that is because being raised Catholic, you've been taught to read the Bible from a certain point of view, right? But I don't
think we weren't encouraged to read it at all. We were encouraged to listen to other people tell us what to think.
Yeah, exactly. So that's you're not like you have to go through the switchboard, right? You can't go direct to the
and one of the reasons I said I'm interested in when we get there, I'm interested in reading perhaps a Jewish version, and also potentially some of the apocryphal stuff that has been
the apocrypha, Well, this is my point. What I was going to say is, I think you say that about it judgmental, but I think that's because you've read it through that lens, right? I'm wondering if you go back to the source and just read the story, that judgment isn't necessarily there
on the page. That may be well true. Yeah.
So do not fear the Bible, Nick. We can do it. We can do it.
All right. It's really long.
We'll break it up into, because it's not. That's the thing. It's not even really. I mean, what the fuck is the Bible? It's scraps, it's things pulled together. It's not that. If you consider, I mean, there's a lot more substance there, but it's not that a million. If you consider them, like the King James version, it's not a million miles away from what they've done with Gilgamesh in terms of filling in blanks that weren't there, judgment calls, and So when we do get to it, I don't think we're even going to get to it as the Bible. We're probably going to break it into
as a series of stories
between other things, and
so anyway,
our Catholic viewers who just left.
Sorry, Gino, if he's there.
I don't think Gino's Catholic, is he?
He's not. Okay.
Well, he's Christian, but I know he's Catholic.
Sorry for suggesting that, Gino. I kind of maybe that's an assumption based on the Italian.
Well, he'll get back to us because you pissed him off, so you will. So
in that case, sorry. So anyway, so Enkidu basically gets told, hey, come on with me to Uruk the sheepfold. You're going to meet Gilgamesh. He learns to eat bread, and he learns not to drink milk by squeezing sheep boobs into his mouth. I think at that part of the story, and then he goes off and he has his grand wrestling match with Gilgamesh, because he arrives just as Gilgamesh is about to deflower one of his, some girl who's about to get married to somebody else, and Enkidu was like not having any of it.
And thus the great bromance of Gilgamesh and Enkidu begins.
They punch each other for a while, and then, like true frat boys, they hug it out, and then
like how me and Nick first met.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Nick's shaved a lot since then. He used to be covered in matted hair. I used to have to comb out the. It was a nightmare, and then we managed to convince you to.
We rolled around the streets of Tokyo, smashing each other into buildings, before finally we went down. We had over some ramen. Yes.
So anyway, so we don't want to go into the whole thing, but so basically there's another. So then there's a series of kind of quests and tales and things. I suppose they go off into this forest and deal with this thing called the Humbaba. On the behest of some guy called Shamash, right?
Some people say that this is a proto, Green Knight from Sir Gawain.
It's a bit Beowulf as well, isn't it? It's but I suppose when you're in this territory, then it's very easy to make connections that are not necessarily. And we'll get to the Michael Schmidt thing as well. It's another thing that he's very much on this. Like he talked, because Sanders and Andrew George were saying, they talk about, people could have traveled. They could have gone over to Greece and told these stories, and they could have gone even further afield. But like he's saying, well, they could have, but it didn't mean
they did.
Yes, yeah. He's quite the pragmatist. He's almost like an anti-romantic pragmatist attack.
Yes, yeah. But the cedar forest may have been in Syria, because there is a cedar forest in Syria. That's quite well known in the Middle East.
But then again, I mean, we should also mention in terms of things like that, though. I mean, from what I understand, parts of like Iraq and other parts of the Middle East, there's been massive deforestation over the centuries. Like they used to be much greener.
And that's what the story is about. It may have been Gilgamesh himself who was involved in clear cutting.
Because that's why people have been wrong-footed and they've looked for like the Garden of Eden somewhere else, right? Because they thought, well, they couldn't have existed in this fucking barren bowl, but it wasn't that then, right?
I mean, I think it is worth mentioning at this point that the reason that Gilgamesh decides to drag and Enkidu is not particularly stoked about the idea of going to fight Humbaba is that he has already realized at this point of the story that he is a demigod, but he's like 2/3 god, 1/3 human, and unfortunately, when they tripped his little DNA code, part of the human stuff he got was immortality. Right, he's going to die.
Right. Yeah. He's like and already or something like that.
Yeah. So already he's starting to think about the long game. Like, how do I make a name for myself? And he decides defeating this guardian of the forest, Humbaba, and then taking the trees back and rebuilding the walls of his city is going to be one of the ways he can leave his name on the earth, so he'll be remembered after he dies. What you said to your point earlier about how
he was right, because 5,000 years later, two dudes on a YouTube
talking about it.
Yeah,
exactly. So good job, Gilgamesh. But the other thing, to your point,
Vive la Gilgamesh,
was about when you mentioned that he what's that? Enkidu had kind of does this kind of like face heel turn towards, like, because he's very much the man of he's green, man. Like he's the guy who is protecting the animals, protecting the trees. And this whole segment is amazing, particularly not so much, actually, this is where N.K. Sanders' version is quite different, I think, than the Andrew George version. The repeated number of times, so they fight with Humbaba, and together they're able to defeat Humbaba, despite Humbaba being a terrifying monster, right? But they engage the powers of the gods, the wind, the winds come. Anyway, all this stuff happens. But at the end, Humbaba begs for his life, what feels like 9 times, over and over again in the Andrew George text. Like, please don't kill me. I can be of service. And every time Enkidu is like, no, kill him now.
It's great. Like, we were talking about the ambivalence and stuff, and the whole, like when door closes and the opens and all that. And the ending of this section is amazing, because it is truly ambivalent, right? It's like, should we feel good, or like they even say it out loud, right? Like, I don't know, did we do good here, or did we not? Like they really don't know, right? Which is fantastic.
It's very intense, and it made it make more sense to me later on when Enkidu ultimately has to pay for this, right? In N.K. Sanders' version, there was this feeling of like I felt like he'd been wronged in some way, that he's the one who has to pay, that he's the one who has to die before Gilgamesh. But in this version, I was like, no, he's given so many chances to get out of this, right? He doubles down and doubles down and doubles down, and they know that Humbaba has been placed there by the god Enlil in order to protect this forest. And they not only kill him, but they clear cut the forest. And then they're like, well, if we put up a door in the temple of the god, it'll all be fine. Turns out, no.
So then we have a bit of a new turn then. But again, I don't know if there's a fragment missing or maybe not, or who knows. So then we go into this whole section about, so Gilgamesh starts berating his lover, Ishtar, or Imamu, because of her treatment of her many former lovers, right?
That section is fantastic.
He's having a go at her. He's basically kind of, you say, but you're just a big slut, basically. Is what. And
not just that, but you wreck the lives of anyone that you pick these guys up and you destroy. There's the one guy who she changes into a bird and breaks his wing, and then he just sits around in a bird crying. I'm assuming that the sound that bird makes in ancient Mesopotamia is the sound of like somebody in despair.
And again, I mean, again, the ambivalence. On the one hand, slut shaming, not cool, Gilgamesh.
Yep.
On the other hand,
Yep.
if that's true, yeah, that's not cool either, right? Like,
and then she goes to her dad,
Anu,
right? Yeah, and to basically say like, Gilgamesh has insulted me, he's hurt my feelings, and dad is like, yeah, you're kind of a whore, like you really don't treat your boyfriends very well. And then the best ever threat, she's like, well, fine, if you don't give me the bull of heaven, right?
Bull of heaven, yes.
I will open the gates to hell. Right. I will open the gates to death and flood the world with zombies, basically.
Yeah. The dead will rise to eat with the living, right? Which again, this is Enki. I mean, we should point out because we're doing the story part now while we're on Sanders. We're going to be a bit Sanders heavy, but that doesn't mean that I think, and we'll get to this later, I think the Andrew George version is essential to read.
Oh yeah, I think so.
But I think it's probably good to read Sanders first, right? Just I agree. To know where you are, right? Yeah. But she sends out this bull of heaven, and it's great. She seems just prepared as well, right? Because the bull of heaven's going to make all the rivers dry and going to create all these huge. He's going to like make holes in the ground, and thousands of men are going to fall into these pits.
Earthquakes. Yeah, like it's a major series of natural disasters.
But she's saying like, dude, I got this. I've made sure there's
7 years worth of food in store. Yep.
Let's do it.
Yes. And so they do. It's she sends the bull down.
She's like the energy crisis Silicon Valley guys, right? She's like, don't worry, we've got our stuff. Yeah. Let it burn, So the bull of heaven, and then of course Enkidu wrestles the bull of heaven and kills the bull of heaven, and then throws a part of the bull, which may or may not be its cock in some versions.
Haunch usually, but apparently some versions.
Into Ishtar's face.
Yep. And you do get the feeling that not only she's insulted, but she's also frightened, because she's realized in some way that these are not really mortals, like that Gilgamesh and Enkidu are something else, right?
I've always seen a glimmer of fear in women's eyes when I throw a bull's cock in their face. I mean,
well, yes, as you would.
Sizable kind of. I don't know. Yeah, bulls must have big cocks, right? I would have thought.
I think so. Yes. It's interesting too. Like this idea, and somebody who's more versed in myth will know of more of these kind of stories than I do. But there's a story from the Tain, from the Cuchulainn cycle in Irish mythology, where the goddess Morrigan, who's the goddess of death, comes and attempts to woo Cuchulainn, and he basically tells her to get lost, and it ends up being quite a scrap again. So obviously there's this recurrent thing in mythology of like the demigod turning down the love of the goddess, right? In
this series we're doing right now, I don't know what to bet money on the amount of times that we will be saying something along the lines of, like when we talk Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
It's coming back. It's coming back again and again and again. But then so basically, and
this is kind of bit for Enkidu, right? Like this is his last
he shouldn't have chucked that full cock in the face. He basically kind of gets kind of cursed or poisoned in some way or another. Yeah. And I love, again, this is the thing is, the Sanders version is so good. It's so well written that even if you wanted to argue with its veracity as kind of a good interpretation of what it is, it's just such a good, like the turn of phrase here, right? When Enkidu dies, the worm fastened on him. That's fucking beautiful. That is.
Yes. Although I will say, although it actually doesn't happen in this tablet, it happens later on when Gilgamesh hangs on to his body for days and days and days, grieving, and then the maggots just start dripping out of his nostril. Yeah, that's a really disturbing image.
If you will indulge me, I would actually like to read. There's a bit in the Enka Sanders where it does turn into a poem.
Okay.
And this almost had me weeping, I have to admit. I'm probably not going to do it justice, but here we go. You can skip forward a minute if you don't want to hear me. Hear me, great ones of Uruk, I weep for Enkidu, my friend. Bitterly mourning, like a woman mourning, I weep for my brother, oh Enkidu, my brother. You were the axe at my side, my hand strength, the sword in my belt, the shield before me, a glorious robe, my fairest ornament. An evil fate has robbed me. The wild ass and the gazelle that were father and mother, all long-tailed creatures that nourished you, weep for you. All the wild things of the plain and pastures, the paths that you loved in the forest of cedars, night and day murmur. Let the great ones of strong-walled Uruk weep for you. Let the finger of blessing be stretched out in mourning. Enkidu, young brother, hark, there is an echo through all the country, like a mother mourning. Weep all the paths where we walked together, and the beasts we hunted, the bear and hyena, tiger and panther, leopard and lion, the stag and the ibex, the bull and the doe. The river along whose banks we used to walk weeps for you. Ula of Elam and dear Euphrates, where once we drew water for the water skins. The mountains we climbed where we slew the watchman weeps for you. The warriors of strong-walled Uruk, where the bull of heaven was killed, weep for you. All the people of Eridu weep for you, Enkidu. Those who bought grain for your eating mourn for you now. Who rubbed oil on your back mourn for you now. Who poured beer for your drinking mourn for you now. The harlot who anointed you with fragrant ointment laments for you now. The women of the palace who bought you a wife, a chosen ring of good advice, lament for you now. And the young men, your brothers, as though they were women, go long-haired in mourning. What is this sleep which holds you now? You are lost in the dark and cannot hear me. I mean, that gives me shivers. I apologize for the poor reading, but that is just, I love that. That's immense.
Yeah. I think it's often held up as being one of the first and one of the truly great.
It's actually quite moved. Just
no, I was surprised, and both times I read it, I got pretty emotional because it seems very real. It seems drawn from somebody who's experienced great loss.
Right.
It's a powerful piece of writing, and it's interesting. It's again, like choices of translation, but in the other translations that we read, that where he talks about mourning like a woman, it's specifically like a hired mourning woman, and that was something that I know that's a tradition, say for example from India, right, of hiring mourners. Yeah, but it's clearly suggested that this was a tradition in ancient Mesopotamia as well, of people hired to go and wail and mourn. But he's really feeling it. He's devastated. I mean, really, the rest of the story, the back half of the entire set of stories is all about him trying to cope with the loss of his friend.
He misses Enkidu, right?
But the other
thing interesting as well, something that doesn't come through in the Sanders one, and some people have argued back and forth over there. And to be honest, I'm not sure if it's relevant, because it is. No,
what you're about to say doesn't. If what you're about to say is what I think you're going to say, I don't think it matters at all.
No, I was going to say the whole homoerotic element.
Yeah, no, I don't think it matters.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, it can be there and it cannot be there, and it really
who cares? They love each other in whatever form they love each other deeply.
Exactly.
And it could be sexual, it could be not. It doesn't matter.
Lube doesn't have to be involved. Right?
No. And it could be, and it wouldn't. It makes no difference.
It
either
also
way.
makes no difference. Yeah, exactly. I would actually, having said that though, having said it doesn't matter, I would really like to see, because we were talking about, we will talk about, we're talking about like the surprising paucity of film versions, for example. I would really like to see a proper gay version of the story.
Right.
Would actually serve the story extremely well.
Yeah. A real bear to play Enkidu as well.
Like or something like that.
Yeah, brilliant. But I was going to say there's one part that and I don't know if it maybe is skipped, or if you skipped it because it's skipped in NK or not. But there's this wonderful part right when he realizes that it's unavoidable and that he's at death's door, where Enkidu like curses the young like trapper guy and curses the harlot, and basically wishes upon them a list of terrible things like that, that they're just, and like particularly the stuff he says about the poor harlot, like that, she's going to have to ply her business like in the shade of the wall, and drunks will vomit onto her, and like it's just like it's some hardcore stuff that he throws. And immediately the god, I think it's Enlil, just was like, hey, hang on.
Yes.
Hang on there, Enkidu. You're being a douchebag.
You're in mourning.
She did a lot for you. She screwed you for like 14 days. Right. She taught you how to use soap, how to eat bread, and she introduced you to your best chum. Like, that's not cool. And he's like, oh yeah. I'm sorry. And then he uncurses her and then blesses her instead. And it's just it's like psychologically a weirdly nuanced, again, for someone so old. It's exactly how we are as humans. We are variable, and in the moment we say things we don't mean, or we're angry, and then somebody checks our behavior and we're like, oh,
right. Well, that's always what I've rather appreciated about the Greek myths as well, and when you ascend the mountain to see Zeus and all those, is they're all like squabbling, right? Mankind is just a puppet, right? Like horrible things happen to people because one of the gods is having a bad day, or another one
their noses out of joint,
slept with someone they weren't supposed to sleep with, or
I mean, that's just I think I can't remember if it's in the it must be in because I've never read the Odyssey. I've only ever read the Iliad, so it must be in the Iliad where there's a part where Zeus just grabs Hera by the hair and throws her off Olympus. like a real domestic, like they do. One of the other gods is phoning the police. Like
it's like that scene from Somewhere on the Estate, right? Gods as pikeys, right?
Yes, the Immortals version. So anyway, but yes, so as we said, poor Enkidu does in fact go the way of play.
So then, as I suppose, like you said, part of the reaction to that, there's this whole section where he goes off on a search for everlasting life, right?
Yes, because once he realizes that if Enkidu was almost his match,
what's interesting then, it goes into a slightly. This reminded me a little bit of how the stories in the Arabian Nights work, where one story leads into another story leads into other stories. So then this search for everlasting life, that's when he's told the story by someone else. What's his name? The guy I should have Utnapishtim.
The Noah.
Yes,
Noah
original Noah, right? OG Noah tells us the story of the flood. But what's interesting to me as well is the way this story starts. It's not just the deluge story. There's a little bit of the Tower of Babel in there as well, isn't it?
Oh yes, yeah.
Because basically the gods go, fucking hell, these humans are loud, reside here, and just let's wipe them out. Because
it's like they're downstairs neighbors in an apartment building, and they're like
banging on the floor with a broomstick, right? Shut up. So because actually it is because isn't it the ocean below they live in as well, isn't it? So they are literally banging on the with a broomstick, and they're like, fuck this, I can't get I've got to get up and go to work in the morning, so let's
kill them all,
flood them,
kill them all.
But we'll tell OG Noah, Utnapishtim, we'll tell him about it, and it's almost, you have to read it very closely, because at first when I read it I thought, oh, this is interesting, this differs, that they don't do the rescuing all the animals thing, but it is in there.
But they do.
And it's in the Sanders version. It's translated as something like the seed of all living things, right? Rather than particularly animals. And then he builds this
Rubik's cube. That's fascinating too. Like this, this massive cube made of wood.
Again, there seems to be a lot of contention about this, right? Some people say it was circular. And some people say it was like a ziggurat or something shape.
I love the idea that it's just a cube though, with like a bunch of like rooms inside that are kind of like that are all cuboid. It's really strange.
With what do they call it? Like people in charge of entertainment, like butlins or something going around.
Right. Yes.
Putting on shows.
Mm-hmm.
HMS Pinafore or something was on for the giraffes.
So yes, but unfortunately, as we know, he doesn't actually discover the secret to eternal life, right? Because he gets told these were very Uta Napishti tells him, like, these are very specific circumstances under which I was granted everlasting life.
Right. Well, there's a whole thing as well about him. Like, at first he's angry at him because he smashes up his boat, doesn't he? And then he says, "Dude, you can't travel without this boat." And
I think that was the ferryman to take him to Uta.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Okay,
the first guy. Yes, and then they go through this terrifying like sea where it's like poisonous and you can't touch the water, and so he cuts all of these cedar poles in order to kind of like, and it almost feels like they disintegrate each time he hits the water with them. And
so this is very River Styxy as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's
and he only gets there after defeating the Scorpion Men.
Right. And there's a thing as well which I didn't pick up from the Sanders version. I'm not sure if I missed it, because it is possible to miss things as well. That it's in there. George and Michael Smith talks about it as well. Is he does mention, again, speaking about kind of weird ambivalence. So don't the gods tell Utnapishtim, leave all your worldly goods behind? But actually he doesn't. Like, he takes all his gold and shit with him, and you think, but there's no consequence. Oh, okay, yeah. You think you didn't do what we were told. We will,
because all the other gods are starting to feel bad about, like, they, we
might have overreacted a bit.
Yeah, it feels like that was overkill. In fact, there's that wonderful like simile in there, which is in all the versions, I think, where when Utnapishtim and his family, they do reach wherever they reach, and then they send up the first sacrifice to the gods. They send up smoke or whatever. That the gods arrive like a cloud of flies, or, and in a way, I guess in that, if gods don't have people to worship them, well then, what are they? Are they still gods? Like, do they depend on?
Well, the fascinating thing about that as well is the Lord of the Flies is Beelzebub, isn't he? As well, right. And that's from this part of the world interpretation of Satan as well, isn't it? So it's
yes, and well, I mean, Pazuzu.
Pazuzu is actually mentioned as well, which
we may get to it in another conversation soon. Right. So
obviously William Friedkin or William Peter Blatty, who we'll be talking about in another show soon. They did their homework, right? I was quite, Pazuzu, that's a real, the wind god. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
that was awesome.
Just making things up. We'll call him Pabongo.
So what I loved about this is at the end when basically Gilgamesh is like, well, fuck, like I've traveled, because that whole thing, well, in the skin of the lion too, there's actually quite a famous book by Michael Ondaatje, who wrote The English Patient.
Okay, right.
He wrote a book called In the Skin of the Lion, which is a quote taken directly from Gilgamesh, right? When Gilgamesh is grieving, which also is it Hercules or Samson? One of the later muscle-bound heroes wears a lion like skin over his.
Yeah, well, there's Jason and his fleece, right, as well.
Right, but I think specifically there's somebody who wears a lion skin. Anyway, we'll get to it when we get to it. But then right as he's leaving, like Utanapishti's wife was like, go on, like just tell him. And Utanapishti's like, well, there is one. There's this plant that grows at the bottom of the water, and it's pretty thorny, but if you do pull it up and you eat it, you do get to basically live your life over again. You get to be young again, and then he screws that up magnificently. Immediately,
it sounds quite difficult. I mean, to dive down and get this thing does sound quite tricky.
Yeah, but he gets it.
Yeah,
and then loses it right away, like by having a snake comes up and just eats it, and then sheds its skin. And then we're like, that's why
snakes again.
Snakes. Yeah. Well, yes, there you go. And then that's kind of it in a way.
Yeah, kind of. And then it's the return of Gilgamesh to Uruk and the death of Gilgamesh and so I don't think there's any need to belabor that stuff necessarily. I mean, because like you said, some of it isn't even considered canon by whoever's making this canon. And
Stanley, I think.
But it just peters out a bit as well, doesn't it? Like,
but I would say though that I do think that whatever version you read, and whether it has the extra stuff at the end, which in a way to me the extra stuff at the end is almost like hitting you over the head a little bit with the message of the story, but I think you get it without it, and that is that what Gilgamesh is forced to realize is that immortality is the things you do while you're alive, right? So he rebuilds the city walls, and he brings all of this antediluvian information.
You're using it as often as you can, I can tell.
I am, yeah.
Did I ever tell you about my uncle and antediluvian who live in Spain?
No. But
they never go near the water. They're scared of it.
What was that anyway? Didn't we read a George Orwell book about antediluvians? Anyway, no, that was Catalonia. Different place.
That was terrible.
I honestly did think that Andalusia was in the title of that book until I realized. So yes, we'll let's move along.
Yes, we'll forget about that. Yeah, although it will be preserved on YouTube forever because that's what the immortality is all about, Nick.
Thanks, Gilgamesh. So when, but yeah, so he does have this realization, and they kind of talk about how having children is one way, but I'm fascinated by this idea that like finding ancient knowledge and bringing it back in what amounts to the first fucking story ever created, seemingly, is this message of like, oh yeah, that's a worthwhile thing, going back further into history and finding out important information and bringing it back so that we can all learn from. Yeah, that's wonderful and strange. Right. And the whole thing. I mean, like, obviously the basic existential questions of like, why are we here? Why do we die?
And the futility of actually trying to figure it out. Right.
Yeah. Just live your life. Like, there's various characters along the way. Just tell them, like, would you just go get drunk, have sex?
Don't really make a fucking podcast about Canonical. What a waste of time. Good.
Yes, live your life.
Beer, enjoy. But we are enjoying it in our own strange way.
Yes, yeah.
No one else is, but watching.
No.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So in that, there's this final section, which, as I said, is controversial in terms of whether or not it belongs there or not. But it is an interesting story, and it may be the oldest story. And it's this one where, because in some ways it doesn't fit, because it brings back Enkidu kind of after he's dead, and he seems to be alive again, and then he goes to the underworld, and then is dead again. And it throws. It's weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of the chronology of the story so far. But it seems to be that Gilgamesh has lost his like field hockey ball and hockey stick, and it drops into the netherworld, and he's bummed out about it, so he sends Enkidu down there. Enkidu
which may be a drum and a drumstick in another version, right?
Yeah, it seems to be some sort of toy he wants back. And then Enkidu comes back and has nothing good to say about the netherworld.
For some reason, when they said the name something Dhamma and it's not a million miles away, I was thinking of those toys with the ball on a string, and you try and catch it in the. Oh, you've got one of you. There we go. It sounds a lot like one of them.
Yes, it does sound like a kendama. Yeah.
Kendama. There we go.
But what do you think's just dropped out of there? Let's hope they didn't break. So yeah, but that's it. It has two of my most favorite lines of the whole thing in there. I haven't got them tabbed here, but basically it's when Enkidu comes back and is like, remember that penis you enjoyed touching so much that gave you such pleasure? Now it's just a beam full of maggots. And remember that vagina that you took such pleasure in? It's just a dusty crack in the mud in the floor. It was just like, it's like, oh wow, that's sad. And then also great stuff about how, like, if you don't have kids, you are fucked in the afterlife. Basically, people who had like 9 kids, they're great. Apparently they're just like sitting around on satin pillows, eating really well. And the less children you have, the worse. And then there's this one guy who doesn't have kids who's just eating a brick. Yeah. And that's his eternity.
A couple of dinks like us are not in for a good time.
Apparently not in the afterworld. So good to know.
So yes, the N.K. Sanders, that's Sandars, prose translation of Gilgamesh is actually, I would say, essential.
Yeah, great.
and it's also a really good starting point, because this is where you get the whole shape of it fixed in your head. I attempted Andrew George first, and to be fair, and we'll get to this, the reasons why, you could start there, but I think this is worthwhile just in and of itself, right? Like,
oh yeah,
and you might as well do it first, because then it just helps you past everything else, and it's a great piece of writing. It's a great piece of writing. So I just apart from, this is just a minor classic that should be in your library, I think.
Yeah.
So we move on to, of course, there's a whole shitload of translations and reinterpretations, and we might talk about some of the reinterpretations a little bit in closing. But I think what is widely considered the definitive modern translation in English, at least, is this one by Andrew George, Penguin Classics edition, lovely cover there, which is Winged Bull, Persian Achaemenid Dynasty, 500 PC, apparently, is what that is.
Okay.
So obviously we've kind of got the story more or less out the way, and I think what's brilliant about this is, so it's back to poetry.
Yeah.
And I think what Andrew George has done here is, we'll talk about all the other contextual stuff as well, but just in terms of his translation of it as a poem, is he's found I think at least he's found a fantastic kind of balance between, it's readable.
Yep.
It's very readable, but it also hasn't sacrificed any of, like, you feel the distance of time between it and you. It feels totally alien and strange. He's retained a lot of the repetition and stuff like that. He hasn't taken it out. You do have to kind of read through the whole thing. And
his version really benefits from being read aloud. And it's funny, it gets into this whole question of whether it was ever intended for that. I mean, the repetition almost works as the refrain or the chorus in a song, right?
Right.
But so I read this entire thing aloud to my wife as she was working on watercolor paintings.
And the gods were banging on the.
They were,
and they flooded the island.
Yeah. I'm doing this from the top of a tree. But yeah, so I really.
And how did that work out? I'm hoping it worked out that Jennifer enjoyed your recitation. You're not now divorced or anything like that.
No.
Right, okay.
No, she did, and I do think that in a way it helped me focus better on it, and it helped me kind of try. You when you read something aloud, you try to breathe some life. I mean, there's plenty of life in the lines, but you do it differently when you read aloud. You think more about where the stresses should be in the poetry,
right?
And
but also we should mention that he includes the gaps as well.
Yes.
So you know where there's stuff missing.
So there's chunks where it feels like you're reading a CIA redacted. Where you're like, there's a lot missing from certain segments, but that's great.
Then to captain of the
exactly
kind of thing.
But I think that it's good.
But it's done. What I mean is, but he's done it in such a. That's actually, you kind of hit the nail on the head there in a way. He's done it in a way that does feel, rather than feel like that's frustrating, it almost adds to the mystery more in the way that when you're reading a redacted document, like, what that might that be? Who's that though?
Yeah.
I think this. I agree. I mean, I'm no scholar, but I can kind of see as a layman why everyone says that this is the one
definitive
to aspire to,
one,
right?
For now. In English, that's the funny thing, right? We have to wonder, like,
apparently
how is the French translation or the German translation?
Early German version apparently is pretty good, isn't it? When the original English translation was via German, right? I think.
Yes, Although apparently he turned out to be a anti-Semitic Nazi sympathizer later on, which didn't do him any favors.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I don't think that necessarily.
Well, no. Specifically,
he did in his poem.
I could say specifically he used Gilgamesh apparently as part of his argument that the Old Testament was clearly too influenced by ancient Babylonian stuff, and it's not a true Aryan text. So that it should, and it's obviously it's Jewish as well. So it should be, they should start with the New Testament, basically, was this whole thing, as that's a real blonde, blue-eyed kind of book, I guess, written by also Jewish people. Anyway, so mysterious.
But so if that was just it, if it was just the poem alone, that would be fine. But there's a whole lot more, right?
Yes.
As well as, like you said, there's illustrations and stuff of the tablets that kind of help you understand that. There's a lot here in terms of context on not only the poem, but again the history of how it was discovered and how the process of the translation. And I mean,
the earlier versions, right? Like he translates pretty much all the extant, material that, unless it's really overlaps with stuff that it would just be redundant. But he's tried to give us all of the earlier chunks, and
So that's your next stop, is this version. I think this is a fascinating book. I mean, I read this whole thing cover to cover twice now, and just it's captivating. Not just the poem, but the whole. I mean, it's a history course in like, wow, fuck, only 200 pages. Right. I mean, this is a real. I think if you only wanted to read one book that took in everything, the history and the context, and having the poem, this is probably the one, right?
Yes, but I think if you want to know the story, then you To be fair,
this has a lot of background stuff.
It does have some of that too. Yeah.
It's more the Cliff Notesy kind of. No, that's unfair. It's more than that. It is very, very good. But I mean, but the thing is, what I mean is, I can't imagine anyone reading this, finding it fascinating, and then not going.
Yeah, like, agreed.
I don't get. And if you've only, if you're dying, and you only have a few days left to live, and you want to spend those days reading, that's your choice.
About other people stressing out about exactly the same thing.
Then maybe just this, skip that, because you have to go on to something else. But no, these are both essential items in my library. I will be coming back to these both again and again, I think.
But it's one little detail that I really like is there's a really novel way of showing the passage of time in one part of this, and it's actually when Gilgamesh shows up to Utanapishti's place and is like, basically, teach me how to be immortal. And Utanapishti is like, well, like it's like trying to battle sleep. And he's like, I'm Gilgamesh. Yeah. What did I say?
Mortal.
Okay, yes. Then no, he already knows how to do that. He's very good at being mortal. So he's like, well, it's like trying to battle sleep, like it's impossible. And he says that, and then Gilgamesh, of course, is like, well, I'm Gilgamesh. I beat Baba. I beat the giant bull out of space. I threw a bear into the sky. I can do whatever. And so immediately passes out. And then they're like, this idea of like, well, the best way to show him how much time he's going to sleep is to bake a loaf of bread for each day he's asleep. And they line them all up, and they're in various states of mushiness and gray moldiness. And when he wakes up, he's like, oh.
Good trick to play in your friends. You can do now with Uber Eats.
Right.
Can I have a day old loaf of bread, 2 a day, etc.
Yes.
Within the next half hour, please. Yep, we could do that. Convince your friends that they've been asleep
for 7 days.
I do it all the time. It's a laugh riot at parties.
Yeah, Mesopotamian humor. So
very specific party, right? Like, most guests don't get it. What are you doing?
No.
It's all this bread. Why have you brought rotten bread into the party?
It stinks. But yeah. So then we did read the book that was kind of all about, in a way, which I'm never going to remember the name of again. Schmidt, is that his name?
Gilgamesh, The Life of a Poem by Michael Schmidt.
By Schmidt, yes.
Yeah.
So yes.
So what did you make of this? Because I have slight issues with this book. Is it fairly recent, 2019? right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea of it. I like the idea of it, which is why I insisted that we read it, because I thought this would be fascinating. However, if you take out his retelling of Gilgamesh again in a very rushed, arbitrary version, this is not designed for people who haven't already read Gilgamesh.
No,
right?
No.
If you take that out, what's left, even though there is some very interesting stuff in it, and I learned a lot, and I appreciate, like we were talking about, his pragmatic approach and how he goes out of his way to explain how it's not necessarily an epic and what we bring to Gilgamesh and all that, right? I mean, he accentuates that, and that's good. But I mean, it's a 160-page, very wide, well, not very wide, but I don't know, it feels, I don't know, it feels there's big gaps, and this is a book that could be shrunk down.
It seems a bit slight.
Yeah, shrunk down to 100 pages maybe, and then take out the Gilgamesh stuff. I'm thinking this doesn't really deserve to be a book on its own. This should be attached to a version like maybe the Andrew. This felt like a whole bunch of, like, someone had collected introductions from Penguin Classics editions and rammed them together into one volume, which is, again, like I said, I'm glad I read it and I got a certain amount of it, but I couldn't help feeling that this was a little bit cheeky to have been put out there as a volume on its own. What do you think?
Yeah, I would disagree. Or disagree? No, I would even agree.
You don't know what disagree is. You don't know what mortal is. Gilgamesh has changed you, Nick. It's confounded you.
Yes. It's, I suffered from a certain amount of brain damage from reading this. No, I mean, yeah, it's strange. I mean, I think what I was expecting out of this was a bit more of the story of, like, I feel like there's another story here. I feel like there's the Indiana Jones story.
Right. Yes, that's what I always thought it would be in it as well. I wanted more pith helmets. I wanted more Victorians, digging around in places they had no business digging around.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm glad they did. I thought there'd be a lot more. In fact, there's more in here.
Yes, and that's what took me aback. I really thought the book would be more about how it was discovered, how it was pieced together, the process of figuring out the ancient languages. But no, it's much more.
It felt like a really extended, like, article, like in the New York Review of Books or something like that.
Yes, it's a critical review of various versions of Gilgamesh.
I forget how much I paid for this book, but I'm guessing, seeing as it's a Princeton, it's a university press, it was probably too much. Do you remember? Was this expensive?
No, I don't. And I bought mine on the Kindle anyway, which makes it a bit more cheap.
Right.
But as I said, it did leave me a few things to follow up on, which is always good.
Yes.
And I mean, he does. I guess, I mean, one of the things it talks about is, I mean, it makes sense, but that at various times across the last 150 years, every translation of this either reflects the author's personal, acts, or that they have to grind, or it reflects the moment in time that is created. It reflects, but I mean, but that's kind of true of any text that's been translated, right?
Yeah, it's not unique to this, right?
No,
it's just that there's so much more room. There's more, how do you pronounce that word? Lacuna. There's a lot more space to be for things to fill it, right?
Right. And it was interesting to me how, Enkidu becomes this kind of like avatar, I guess, for the environmental movement in the 50s and 60s, right? Like that people look to him as being, but then in the story, that's strange because he does such an about face in some ways. The idea that like civilization has to come at the cost of a connection to nature is an interesting idea, that it goes back 5,000 years. That fascinated me, because we're still trying to figure that out, I think, as a species.
I think so,
to what,
yeah.
I
don't think we figured that one out quite yet.
No. Yeah, as I said, I mean, but that's specific to this book. It was interesting to read quotes, but it did feel like almost like it was an assemblage.
Right. It's not bad. I'm not having a go at Michael Schmidt, and like I said, he does have interesting things to say. But yeah, I mean, I'm not putting this on the list as an essential along with the other two, right? Like, there might be another. Well, there probably is another book out there with the stuff we wanted more in depth about the discovery of it, and so in fact we may even circle around and read it at some point if we come across it, right? Because it might also be part of, let's say, a book all about how various ancient texts were rediscovered, and we might come across it in a chapter on a book about that kind of thing at some point.
And then there is the other thing that I read was this.
Okay. Oh, that looks nice.
And I'll just scan on.
That looks like the head. Put the head up again.
Okay, sure.
That looks like.
There we go.
Who was the editor of Oink magazine? You remember?
Yes.
Does that look like him? That alien thing, I forgot what it was called, but
that's a great deep cut
with like pus coming out of the yeah.
It
really looks like the Oink editor. Wow.
So this is done by a father and son team. The dad seems to be like not Sumerian, but like somebody involved in the university. I don't know that necessarily he's absolutely a translator, but he does seem to have some Babylonian, some Akkadian, and so he's done some of his own translation, and then he's also used other translations to kind of compile this. And then his son apparently is was an underground comics guy who did autobiographical comics about his band or something like that. But anyway, it's
What are their names? What are their names?
So they're both called Dixon and Dixon. I'll go back to the front when I go through this, but
is it just called Gilgamesh?
I think so. Gilgamesh by Dixon and Dixon. But it's got this kind of I quite like the style of it. It's, as I said, it's almost like there's an underground comicsy feel to it, but there's almost also like a kids comicsy feel to it as well, like Viz magazine, which is not for kids, but like there's. I know it was it's great. Unfortunately, you can't zoom in on this. It's not one of the ones where you can.
Right.
Oh no, hang on. Remember, if you click on the individual panels, you can kind of.
Old man figures out technology before you're very.
Yes, there you go. But there's a nice picture of Enkidu lapping, and he's nicely hairy.
So is it good?
I thoroughly enjoy this, and it is different again because he's used different translations. So each time you come back to it, you're never reading the same thing twice. Right. And also depending on where people weight certain things, where they, it's always different.
My extracurricular reading was I'm about quarter of the way through Robert Silverberg's Gilgamesh the King. So remember 1984, I think. Robert Silverberg, of course, being most famous as a science fiction author, right?
Yes, yeah.
Read a couple of his things, and so basically his is a fairly straight up kind of attempt at let's tell the Gilgamesh story, as a novel, right? As a speculative historical fiction, I guess. And thus far, it's pretty good. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. I thought it was a slimmer volume than it was, so I expected to have been finished in time, but I didn't. But so far, it's pretty good. It's about as it's kind of what you'd want from a speculative historical fiction version of Gilgamesh. I think I haven't got into any of the juicy stuff yet, like he hasn't met Enkidu or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
It's all about how he basically become king, and and his forebears, and like the ceremonies, the process of how one becomes a king, and all the things around it. And it's quite interesting. It's a little belabored at 400 pages. I feel it's because, as you know, I also have a slight low tolerance for a certain tone of fantasy, but this kind of largely avoids that.
But the joke is, my understanding is that it's basically one of the complaints about it when I was reading it, because I tried to find a copy and then couldn't, but when I was reading reviews of it in an attempt to locate a copy, was that
because I could get a copy, I deliberately didn't read any reviews. So
so it really eschews any of the magical stuff, right?
So far.
Apparently it does all the way through.
But that's what I appreciate about it in a way, because it's almost like he's, I suppose, rather than do the epic of Gilgamesh, I suppose he's done the historical Gilgamesh, right?
Okay.
And then, but I appreciate that, because there are so many other versions out there. There's certainly room for a non-magical, this might be what the truth that all those other stories are based on kind of version. So yeah, good on him for having a go at it, right? I think I'm going to continue. I'm like 25% through on my Kindle, and I'm going to take a bit of a break, but I think I shall continue with it. So yeah. By the way, no, never mind. So did you read any other versions?
No, so the last one I have got, but I haven't started to read it yet, is in 1989, Jim Starlin, who is a probably trying to think, best known, I think he might have created Thanos, who appeared a lot in recent Marvel movies.
Okay, right.
Played by what's his face from the Goonies. And then I think he was the one who killed Robin in the 80s, in the when Robin got beaten to death with a crowbar. So, but he did a version, I guess, like a 4-issue kind of a graphic. Well, it's not a graphic novel, because I guess it wasn't successful successful enough to ever warrant being bound together into a book. But he did a 4-issue miniseries for DC called Gilgamesh 2, which appears to be a sort of a science fiction / superhero version, where it's kind of like
okay, I'm like already Superman. Losing the will to live, but
yeah, you would love it, I'm sure. I have no idea. I have no idea if it's good or not. But it's evidently,
did you order each individual copy then? Oh.
No, I managed to find this online in a way that
a man in an alley with a big overcoat.
That's exactly what happened.
Back issues.
I went to a certain
Gilgamesh.
That's yeah. I went to a bay full of corsairs and found it there. But let me see if I can actually open up my
thief. Thief! I'm calling the police. Hello? Yes, I need assistance in the. Okay, right.
So I think the idea is that these two space pods crash into Earth, one containing Gilgamesh and one containing Enkidu.
But your theft is probably legit as well. I'm guessing that this thing is out of print and
yeah, it seems to be completely impossible to find. Yes, right. But yeah, as I said, can't say I will read it, or at least I'll try. And if it's good, I'll.
Well, let me know if it's actually any good.
Yeah, I'll share it with you. So.
But yes, and I suppose the other one is why as they used to write into points of view. Why is there not Luigi Cossi Gilgamesh starring Lou Frigno, from the early 80s?
Yep.
In which
with George Eastman as
George Eastman's got to be.
Yeah.
Why does this not exist? Or basically, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how come there isn't? I mean, there's a few shorts, and there's a Hungarian TV series from the 70s. I managed to find that, and there's some animated bits and pieces. I think the K brothers, I think, tried a Gilgamesh, but basically, why is there not at least half a dozen live. They don't have to be good, you know, like happy old like peplums from the 60s or something. And why are there no Gilgamesh?
I don't know, because I mean, maybe he just didn't have the name draw of a Samson or a Hercules or Machiste.
Man, if you dropped a movie tomorrow and no one had heard of Gilgamesh, people are going to go see that. It's a cool name. People are going to be intrigued by it. I don't think that's a legit reason not to do it. Why are there? I really this puzzles me, because everything else has been turned into a movie again and again and again. This is confounding. I did find a few. There's a few. I mean, the thing is with those old peplums as well. They deal in this kind of ancient world gumbo, right, where people from Greece and Rome, and there are a few alluding to Babylon. There's war gods of Babylon. There's a Hercules one versus the beast. There's a few, but most of them don't really, you know, they're basically just Roman mercenaries and Greek characters, you know, but also there is none of them are specifically. There's no Gilgamesh in any of them, right? Or
no. If you IMDb the name, it shows up in very few things, and certainly nothing where he seems to be played straight as being this character. I mean, the epic is kind of a bummer. Maybe it's because, like, I mean, I guess if you adapt the first half up until, you know, the battle with the Great Bull, but after that it becomes a very kind of sad story of a guy meandering around trying to find a way to escape death and ultimately failing.
I'm wondering if it is because it's relatively new. I mean, it's discovery, or it hasn't seeped far enough into the public consciousness yet.
How many versions really of the Iliad and the Odyssey are there that are actually like movie treatments? I know there's Troy, but like that actually
there's mini-series as well, right? And there's quite a few. If you go looking around, you will find Iliads and Odysseys, but not Gilgamesh's. I mean,
I remember Tony
very
Richardson.
keen to see this Hungarian TV series if it exists.
Right.
Do
you remember the Tony Richardson thing where he would wander around the beaches of like England telling you the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey, just orally retelling?
No, I don't think I've seen any of them.
Okay, yeah, I loved that as a kid. Yeah, I mean, I was a kid, but I remember loving it as a kid. It was
Tony
Baldric.
Richardson, not Robinson.
Maybe Robinson. Yeah. Right. Whoever was Baldric.
Baldric, right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yes. In that case, I did know what you're talking about.
Okay, right. Who's Tony Richardson?
Someone else.
Okay.
And he's both mortal and immortal. And yeah.
Okay.
And what was the other word you fucked up there?
Can't remember. Right. So yeah, no, I mean, if we're gonna talk about starting the canon anywhere, if you're gonna read, then this is a great place to start reading. I think, you know, after C Spot Run, you want to go right to N.K. Sanders' The Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah. I don't know what C Spot Run is, but that sounds like a command on your PC.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
To find something. What is C Spot Run?
I'm thinking if you were to begin learning to read, you probably would start with something in the Ladybird kind of.
Was that a Ladybird book? C Spot Run.
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah.
The Spotted Dog.
Spot Run. Yes. Maybe before your time. It was between Babylonian and Assyrian, I believe.
Right. The Epic of Spot.
Spot. Yes.
And how he ran. Oh, like who are the running fuckers? Melos, right?
Okay.
You know, the Damon and Pathaya story, there's the Run Melos Run, the Dazayo Samu short story they made it.
No.
You're glazing over, Nick.
I have never heard of this at all.
As our viewers already did ages ago. So we should probably bring it to a close.
Yes, yeah.
So this was the Epic of Canonical as Feck. We knew at this, so we'll probably try and streamline it a bit in future. And but there we go. That was our noble attempt to kickstart this project. I hope it wasn't too shit and rambling, although I suspect it probably was. But you know, We are, but we are only human.
Yeah, sadly, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I am 2/3 God, but
is that right? You never would have thought.
No. I hide it well.
1/3 sheepdog.
Yes.
Right. So until then.
So we are.
Yeah.
We're sticking with the Sumerians, right? So we're doing this next, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
What is that?
The Sumerian Book of the Dead, Ink and Blood. You know the one.
Why do you happen to have one of them there?
Because we're talking about ancient Sumeria. And,
all right, you've second guessed our. Or did you have that?
I assumed we were dealing with.
I thought you had the Necronomicon there, because that looks like the Necronomicon in the Evil Dead, doesn't it?
That's what it is, because you'll find in the Evil Dead it's claimed to be a Sumerian book, not the H.P. Lovecraft. I'm sad I'm having to explain the jokes to you, Clive. That's never a good sign. Never a good sign.
No, you're clearly not funny.
That must be it. Or you're not very bright. One or the other.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be that.
Couldn't be that. No. Because you're 3/3 God.
Right, we're off to have a fight, and yes, and we'll see you next time, where we'll be even more canonical as Feck than we were this time.
Yes, and slightly less epic.